Hello, good day. Welcome. I am here with the beauty of the midday to welcome you to an interesting program. Mind Works for Children is about helping children help themselves, body, mind, and spirit. We ask questions about nurturing the spiritual nature of children and helping children find ways to calm themselves down, feel their strength, and tap into their inner resources. Some of the questions that we will be asking today has to do with spirituality and children. A parent sometimes wonders how to nourish a child's spirituality. A teacher has asked how to draw out the inner life of the spirit in the classroom. Researchers often hear children ask profound questions and are interested in sharing the remarkable wisdom and compassion that is gleaned from their remarks. How can we nurture the spirituality of our children and youth? And what is their spiritual world really like? What are the tools and special skills that are required to develop and enhance our children's spiritual life? These and more answers will be open today with our very special guest, Mary Hart, who is the co-founder of Child Spirit Institute, the institute that is exploring and nurturing the spiritual world of children and youth. Mary, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roxanne, for having me. I'm
it's always
pleased
a
to be
pleasure.
here.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Mary. I know the last time I saw you was a couple of years ago when you were hosting, sponsoring the Child Spirit Institute in California and had a lively collection of teachers. And I would like for you to just share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, basically what your background is and how you got interested in this work.
Well, I'd be happy to. Well, I would say it had to go back to my childhood when I was probably about 5 years old, and I was running home from playing at my neighbor's house, and something just made me stop. And as I stood there, I looked up above me, and I just had this remarkable experience that I didn't feel I was able to share with anyone in my family at that time, and kept it very much a secret for my whole life. And as my daughter, who was about 6 years old at that point, started talking about conversations with her angels, it all came back. And so we, my husband and I were curious about this and started asking other people, how prevalent is this for children? And that started our long and wonderful journey into working with children and adults who have their own unique experience with spirituality.
So you mean to tell me that you too, at 5 or 6 years old, heard your angel or a guide?
I did.
You did?
And,
wow, what was that like?
Well, it was really amazing. I mean, again, it was just this automatic kind of stopping and looking up above in a 5-year-old's mind, not really knowing what to make of it, but being able to see something that was very translucent and realizing at that point, well, it's not a bird and it's not, and yet I grew up with the concept of angels but never really believed that they existed. And so anyway, so that was my entry into this, and then I really felt throughout my childhood and early adulthood guided by the comfort of having these presents with me. And so now not all children and not all people experience angels, and there's so many different ways in which people tap into this phenomena that I don't want, people to feel that just because they haven't experienced angels or guidance or these, profound experiences,
right,
that they don't have a rich inner life as well. So
that's beautiful and a very good point. So one of the purposes, I would assume, of Child Spirit is to help parents and teachers understand how to, as you call it, open to presence or become more self-aware.
Yes, yes. Well, and so that opening with our older daughter really got us on the road of researching. We collected hundreds and hundreds of stories. We just went around and both through references from other people and through just asking everybody that we contacted, what was your childhood like? And we would sometimes have a lead-in question, but the research that we collected in about a 3-year period was remarkable. And so from that, we were able to see that there were certain kinds of experiences that children recalled having that we grouped them into particular places. And from that, my husband wrote a book, The Secret Spiritual World of Children. And,
right. We are hoping to have Tobin on in the not-too-distant future,
right.
The Secret Spiritual World of Children, and have him explain a little bit more about it. But I want to focus on your own personal experience as well as your educational background and how it is that you do what you do.
Okay. Well, again, feeling very much guided. I went through my education background really was of counseling, psychology, and I became a therapist for a number of years, and I did deep tissue work and a lot of energy healing work. And so that very much played into my sensitivity then in my professional world when I started talking with children who were, having these kinds of experiences. So kind of preparing. And then, of course, as a parent.
Right.
And my children have been my best teachers as far as the experiences that they've had. And sometimes I feel like I'm a half a step ahead, and sometimes I feel like I'm a mile behind and having to run to catch up as far as what they're talking about and what they're experiencing, and for me to try to understand that. And but it's the combination of all that that really prepared me for then. At the time, we started Child Spirit Institute, probably, it was about 1999, and at that time there was not a lot of resources for parents or, as you said, educators or therapists, and for people to both find each other, but also people who were doing research in the field.
Right.
And so that kind of gave us the vehicle for working more directly with people who are interested in children's spirituality.
What is the philosophy of Child Spirit?
Well,
your mission statement. I guess that might be a more appropriate idea.
Sure. Well, our philosophy is really that we are all spiritual beings in a physical body. And when we really come to that concept that we come in knowing and we come in as spiritual beings, that we have some remembrance and we have that guidance with us, and that sometimes in the physical body we've forgotten that. And so it's, and again, the children that we see have a very clear, most of them have a clear remembrance of that. And it's more tuning back into that, what it's
Mary,
like.
Excuse me, I think that, some of those folks who are listening may be intrigued by what you just made reference to. And so I wanted to ask you if you have any accounts that you might share with us today that exemplify this idea of children being aware of the fact that they are spiritual beings.
Oh, sure. There's hundreds of stories, but some of my favorite that we continue to hear over and over have to do when babies are born and there's an older sibling, and the more common kind of stories that parents will be listening outside the door because they may hear the older child talking to the younger child, or it may be a 5-year-old talking to a 2-year-old, and the story might go something like, don't forget what it's like being with the angels, or don't forget, or as the younger children are beginning to talk, the older sibling might say something like, tell me again what it's like before you were in a body. Those are very common kind of stories that we hear. Or they may be stories where children are talking about swinging or having some kind of, they may be involved in some kind of activity and in the process of falling from monkey bars or swings or whatever, recalling that their angel caught them. Or, I mean, the stories just go on, but they, or at nighttime, many children commonly will talk about when they go to sleep, that's their time to reconnect to the spiritual world. So, so those are a few kinds of things that parents might listen for.
Yeah, some of the questions I could almost hear parents wondering might be, how can I be with my child when they're tuning in this way, and what's my role to cultivate further appreciation and self-awareness?
Well, that's a good question. The kinds of things that we encourage parents to do to really tune in and to nurture that, I think my experience, or the stories that we've heard, usually have children recalling experiences. So parents may have the privilege of being present right at that moment, but most of the time it has to do with children recalling stories, or I remember the time when, or when I do this, or when you're rubbing my forehead. But it's mostly a recall kind of thing, and it's really having parents tune into what the children are saying, and it's usually very those intimate moments, either before they go to bed or when they're waking up or in the car, and something will trigger this for the child, and that's the times that we just sit and let those moments linger, and maybe ask a couple questions, but it's not so much prodding as helping the child to remember or to not re-experience it, but to stay attuned to that feeling. And so those are some of the things. So really listening deeply to what the children are saying. And when children might say something that would make you pause and wonder, I usually give a lot of time. If my child has said something, I might give a pause and just say, well, tell me more about that. And there's different kinds of questions that really can elicit that. And a lot of times through a busy day, we get caught up in the activity. And so it's really, really important to just listen.
No, that's so true. It's so simple and yet so easily, I'd say, jumped over because of an invisible sort of pressure that many times is felt in the hustle and bustle of a day and getting children carted here and there. But maybe one or two more prompting questions would also be helpful for the listening audience to take in. I love using "tell me more." It's open-ended and it doesn't make the child wrong. It really gives way to, as you said, honoring their wisdom, honoring, they know something and you're interested. And gosh, it's a very open, allowing sort of feeling. Very open.
Yes.
What else do you think? Do you have another one or two questions that are really great like that?
Well, the other thing that we seem to see a lot of is when children are in nature. Any kind of nature seems to be a very quick connection. And whether it's being in the city and just experiencing trees and flowers in the sky, or whether it's really going on a hike, but that seems to open them up to just to being present to whatever is going on with them. And again, it's not so much that future-oriented or that past-oriented, but really being in the present that helps them connect. Yes,
so, exactly. So beautiful, too, and it's not something that we have, as I remember growing up, been taught how to do. It wasn't until I was much older that I learned what it meant to be in the present moment.
So we play games also that, lying on our backs, looking up and kind of squinting and sometimes seeing the different things, or closing eyes. And it's like, well, what do you see when you close your eyes? And sometimes people experience the colors or the shapes or images come to mind. And, but we play a lot of games like that with children. And so those are just a few things that we do. And again, it's all in the face of just being playful.
Exactly.
And wonder.
Exactly.
I wonder, and that kind of staying open to whatever. So
I wonder is a great one.
Yeah.
I know when you make reference to nature, I often use nature too in the work around using guided imagery as a process to help parents and children really stay with their imagination and to help open the mind to another way of tuning in to this stillness and the peacefulness deep within us. And I have a little clip from this CD that you heard at the opening of the program called "From a Grain of Sand, I Can Make a Pearl," and in it, really, it's using rhyme and rhythm and the music of the ocean along with children's voices as they narrate the various parts. This little voice that you'll hear in a few minutes is the voice of the pearl itself. And because the pearl has for so many years been one of the most beautiful but mysterious and exquisite symbols of transformation, I decided to use it as a metaphor for children to imagine being like an oyster at times when they are having some upsetting feeling, and just turn the grain of sand like the oyster does until it turns into a pearl, like a pearl of wisdom. And in the story, the little girl who meets the oyster gets to recognize the idea of changing the focus from something that's upsetting to watching the breath, feeling the breath, quieting her mind, and finding the pearl, the still point, the treasure within, that quiet self, that peaceful self, the inner me I love. So I'm going to ask Cameron to just give us this sentence and accentuate your message, Mary, with this sweet voice of the pearl.
Oh, great.
Breathing in and then out. Now imagine you look out and notice the surface of the sea, where splashing waves are moving, changing constantly, like the movies of your mind, like pictures words create, like thoughts, pesty or not, that can be bugging you. Become aware of the thoughts your mind makes for you. watching your thoughts, breathing in, watching your breathing, breathing out. Imagine you go below the surface to find the pearl, your true center place, that part of you that cannot be disturbed by changing ripple or thought or mood above. It is your inner you love. The stillness that does not waver. Say to yourself, I can stay in the storm or I can go below. The choice is mine, now this I know. I can choose my peace instead of the storm, yes, changing my focus from above to below, from outside to in. Feeling my breathing is the way to begin. Watching is the way in. When I quiet my mind, I find the pearl, the still point, the treasure within. It is my quiet self, my peaceful self, the inner me I love. It is the inner me I love, where stillness, calmness, peace within is all I feel, is all I am.
All right. So, Mary, I guess you get a sense of that.
That was just beautiful. I loved the music and the relaxed feeling I got, and just listening to that. That's wonderful, Dr. Roxanne. So yes, that's very much the kind of tools that we use with children also. So
really, to help them redirect their attention. In fact, I think a lot of what you're doing in educating parents and teachers is to raise our self-awareness. And I wanted you to just mention a little bit about your point of view that you had shared with me before we began about how it is that you do speak to the adults so that they can be with the children.
Yes, we very much believe that who we are as adults, the more that we are aware and have found our own tools, the better that we can serve or address the needs of the children. And in addition to that, I just want to make note that not always the way that the parent is going to work for the child. And so that it's, and again, I think that as we grow in that awareness, that we'll see that, okay, just because this works for me, it may not work for the child. And there's wonderful toolboxes of activities or exercises or things that we can do that work both for adults and for children.
Great. We have a question that came in, Mary, while we were listening from Barcelona. Is it?
Yes, that's right. That's right, Dr. Roxanne. We have a question from Emmy in Barcelona, Spain. I'm going to read the question to you. She's in our chat room, and she has two children, 9 and 12 years old, and she says that she helps them grow in and with love, but at the same time she has the feeling she has to protect them. She loves the music, and her question is that sometimes it is so difficult for sensitive children to be surrounded at school by children of all kind of dimensions. They need to be strong, but at the same time keep on being sensitive. Sometimes I'm afraid that this hard world. I am afraid of this hard world to harm them. How can one help them? I know that love them is the most important, but still, world can be so hard.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question, isn't it, Mary?
That's a wonderful question, and that is a question that I would say we probably get most often as in working with children who are sensitive. Some of the things that we do in working with sensitive children really has to do with teaching them some boundaries, but it also very much, and with your meditation, is that center place, that when they have a strong sense of themselves, that they aren't as easily rocked or knocked off from their center base, but also coming from a place where they're grounded and know a boundary. And again, what we talk with children is putting their arm out in front of them, and it can be either their physical arm or it can be an arm, a visual, just kind of an imaginary arm, and letting them know that the space inside that arm is their space and that nobody needs to penetrate that. And children can learn to radiate from their center and meet people in their space. But so this whole issue about a boundary is one that we have found to be very helpful for sensitive children. And even playing with it, we'll give our kids chalk and have them go outside on the cement or someplace where they can actually draw a circle. Well, how much space makes you feel comfortable? And letting them play with that idea so that they become familiar with that. That would be one thing that we would do. Roxanne, I'm sure you come up with this question often, too.
I do, too, but those are great, Mary. And actually, I hadn't used either one of those techniques. Another way that I would say we as adults can help our children feel more comfortable is to be mindful of what your energy is doing, meaning, guided imagery and meditation practices are about not taking all of your thoughts out of your head and not having any thoughts. It's as if what we want to do is to notice what's coming up. And like the ripples on the ocean surface, you want to go below the turmoil to that center place. But while you're noticing that something is impacting you or you're afraid, that's an energy that tightens and constricts and chokes off the flow of trust and love. You want to just see, where are you holding a certain idea of fear, for example, that may be generating the energy of more fear toward the children, because besides activating a deep state of rest, which shifts our physiology, we learn by using these methods and these processes of being in moment-by-moment awareness to use our mind in a special manner, to focus the mind. And in order to move your energy, you need to access your faith and your intention, your desire. If I say to the children, when you say to yourself, I desire or I believe my, world is safe or the angels are around and about me, you turn the energy on. You turn up the voltage. And when you absolutely know with some certainty, then the energy goes up even higher. The voltage goes up even higher, and there's no limit to what you can accomplish, because you really do access another level of belief and inner stability that is grounding you, while at the same time you're really paying attention to the outer world, right? So do you follow?
Oh, absolutely, and I'm really glad you brought up this point, because one of the things that I'm very much aligned with what you're saying, and to not really put out that we have to live in fear or protection, and that we can protect ourselves if we're attuned. So I would say that that's very much in alignment with what we would do also, is really coming from that center place.
Exactly.
So it just gives you so much more information of what you need to do then to navigate in the world. And
exactly.
And again, for a parent, when you see your child coming home from, my children go to public school, and when I am able to tune in and be aware, I can tell when they have had a particular kind of day, and it's like, okay, what do we need to do then so that they know how to shift? So,
exactly.
and it's that constant using each opportunity as a learning and fine-tuning their skills. So,
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
I know that you have been teaching Sunday school, and you work with young children, even a little bit younger than 9 and 12 years old, maybe 4 and 5. And they have an amazing way of being in this world and yet sometimes not of this world, or actually pretty well still tuned into another place altogether.
Yeah.
I just wanted you to share with the listeners a little bit about your experience with the feedback that these young children give you about what they know and what they've learned.
Well, we every year I'm always amazed at what children share, and this year was certainly no exception. But for instance, we might be reading a story, and one particular story we were talking about was listening. And again, it was very much that same notion of how do we listen to whether you would call it God or the all or divine or ourselves or our angels. You know, there's so many words for it. So we were reading this story about how we listen, and the children just went into this spontaneous conversation in the middle of the story, you know, raising their hands and, I listen, and one was pointing to their forehead. I listen through here. And another one was saying, well, I listen through here, and they were pointing to their heart. And another child was saying, well, I listen best at night, and when I'm asleep, God speaks to me. And again, I just sit in amazement of what these children are sharing with us, that given the opportunity to listen. And but they talk everything from their experiences of both being in a body and not being in a body, and very much aware of what is going on in other dimensions. And so I feel very grateful to be in their presence.
You're not kidding. I couldn't agree with you more. I think they are the most amazing, I'd say, age group, the 3, 4, 5. They know a lot, and if you're up for it and you sit down, you might learn a few things. But I think J.G. Bennett said to the question that someone asked him, what is it that we should do so children grow up right? Do you recall this? I believe Tobin was at the same conference and you and I when this was brought out. And he said, well, first, no one can see the possibilities of another. And I think really being in that childlike space of I wonder, even with your own children when you think you know them, just step aside and stay open to, I wonder, really, if we could try to know that little being, we cannot know all of who he is. It is the unknown possibilities in that child that matters. It is the invisible that is far more important than the visible.
Yes, yeah.
Right? I mean,
absolutely.
Really, it's a humbling experience when you stop and listen to their ideas. It's truly,
and what they know.
It's amazing when you do honor what they know.
Yeah.
So he was also asked, how can we work with this understanding? And he said, remember that this awareness and acceptance is more necessary to the child than anything else.
Absolutely. And on that note, it is that we all, again, it's going back to this notion that we all have our unique way of experiencing whether you want to call it spirituality or our inner life, and that one recipe doesn't work for all people, and that children have at very young ages, have their own way of knowing. And sometimes I'm amazed with parents who, have all the best intentions and teach them their way. And of course we start from that point. And then I think we need to leave it open so that the children, and I would end, if I were saying to my child or the children I work with, well, this is something that I know that has worked for me. What works for you? And always bringing that back for them to then, or have you had a different kind of experience? And always inviting that back to them so that we don't presume to know for them.
Oh, that's beautiful. I like the example of how we can give parents a takeaway, a few recaps here in terms of how to stay in a conversation with your child so that you can actually get them to access their own wisdom and wonder, saying things like, tell me more, or as Mary just said, this works for me, what works for you? That's sort of an open-ended prompt. And tell me a story about that if you're doing artwork. And I know that we didn't speak much about it, but storytelling and use of art, along with guided imagery and meditation, are really wonderful processes to inspire imagination and trigger the child's awareness and recount of their own inner world, as Mary puts it, their inner life. Isn't that true, Mary?
Absolutely. And again, going back to very simple things that might open children up. I love this. Just, again, something as simple as chalk, or we'll take a piece of fabric and draw the outline of a child lying down on it, and ask the child to fill that in. And how do you see yourself? Or what are the things that you see around you? Or how do you experience the space around you? You can ask it in a number of ways. And the amount of information that we get, everything from children. I learned from one little 4-year-old last summer that the child sees, she doesn't see people through their skin or their features, but she actually sees what their bodies look like in terms of their organs and their physical systems, whereas other children might see colors around bodies and have their own interpretation of those colors. So it's very simple kinds of activities and exercises that you can do to help draw this out from children and how they experience. Another child drew her hands and feet a bright red and said, this is what I'm like when I'm angry. My hands turn red. And so she very much had her own way of knowing her experience of being angry. And so artwork is, and again, this is just one simple example of it.
Exactly, one simple example, because the other aspect that I know we talk about is, and have been asked, is how do you teach children how to pray?
Yeah. Well, and again, I think through your meditations, and but prayer is a two-way. We talk about it as a two-way conversation. That part of it has to do with communicating my thoughts, my wishes, my intentions, and then the other part has to do with listening, just as you would in any other kind of conversation. And it's that listening. And again, how children listen really varies. It's not just through their thoughts, or, but they experience things through their body. Or, I'm trying to think of some of the other ways in which they've talked about prayer. Oh, great.
Listen, Dr. Roxanne and Mary, we have an email question from someone in New York. They would like to know. They have 3 children. One age is 7, another is 15, another one is 18. And they would like to know if on how they could talk to their children or teach their children about the spiritual aspect of being able to see, angels and such, because let me see what he says here. He or she, I'm not sure what it is. He says that his youngest is talking to a lot of different play friends that he says exist, and their older kids are kind of in the rebellious stage right now, and he says that there may be some influence other than what we can see, and he's just wondering if there's a way to be able to talk to these children without sounding, I guess he's asking without sounding too forceful with them, or trying to invalidate anything that they're going through right now.
Mm-hmm. Mary?
That's a wonderful question.
It is.
Go ahead, Roxanne.
I was going to say, I'll take it after you if you have an impulse.
Well, there's several different directions where my mind is taking me. Actually, Tobin just finished an article that was published recently. I think it was in the Psychotherapy Networker on imaginary friends, and we have a very strong belief that not all imaginary friends are imaginary.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, it's that deep listening. Well, what does your friend or your friends provide for you? Are they a source of comfort? Do they give you wisdom or guidance? Or, again, these kind of conversations, tell me more about your friends, and, the kinds of things. And sometimes you can really discern the role that these friends play, and very profound kinds of experiences. There was one story that I had, and this will just be a short story, where we were hearing the story from an adult who had imaginary friends, and one was French. And this French imaginary friend actually helped her to learn to speak French. And when her family wondered, well, where are you getting this? She goes, my imaginary friend is teaching me. And that made the parents kind of, stop and stand still and pay attention that, wow, this may not be so imaginary. But that French little a guide was also providing a source of comfort and conversation when the little girl was in crisis. So that would be one thought.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think what we also want to address here is how to handle the dubious elder siblings who may be causing some, I would say, negative feedback to the 7-year-old who may be gifted. And rather than make the 15 and 18-year-old wrong, you might invite them to listen for their own guidance by way of practicing the presence or opening to presence. And Mary, why don't you talk a little bit about how you do teach that?
Yes, well, especially
parents.
One of the tools that we would use for older children is and again, it depends on the child, but one tool that we have found really helpful is really encouraging teens to do a lot of writing. And whether it's in the form of a diary or a journal or something that is very private, it's understood that nobody shares this information, nobody reads it, it's only for the teen. And sometimes it's just staying open and listening and jotting down the thoughts. And sometimes the older children or teens, young adults, will have the experience of thoughts that aren't always coming from their minds. And it's, again, this kind of being directed with answers. And we would start it with questions. Well, what's going on? What is troubling me? And why is it troubling me? And to just reflect on that with a pad and a pen. And we have found that to be really helpful. There are let me think of, Roxanne, you jump in, and I'm going to think of a couple other.
All right, you think of a couple. I think what I'd like to underscore here to the person who emailed Cameron is to say that the most important thing is to have the parent have a strong position or a voice for openly stating to all of the children, especially in front of the 7-year-old, that this 7-year-old has something very special that's going on for him, and that every one of us has the capacity to cultivate that, and we do it in different ways. As you get older, you certainly journal and use your writing, but when you're younger, you might do the kind of talking to yourself to another person or an imaginary person who really is just another aspect of you. And I would want to use quotes from great artists or share with the older kids various examples of how this inner life comes alive, whether it be through the artwork. Last week we talked a little bit about Martha Graham and her beautiful quote, "There is only one of you in all of time." And the essence of her message, which I think is so appropriate for the 15 and 18-year-old, is that, you know, kids, I want you to know there is, as Martha Graham put it, a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. I could go on and give you the longer version, but that, in a nutshell, is the message that I would encourage the parent to use as the opener for making it safe and okay for the 7-year-old to have a way of expressing what's going on between his imaginary friend and himself or herself. And then I would like to add that if you gave, let's say, an exercise to the older children where they take that quote and they contemplate it and then they write something about what it means to them, the parent might be surprised at how well they could access a more positive note. And this is something that one of the children that I've worked with who's read the quote, and I asked her to write in her journal something that she wanted to share with me about the meaning of it. And this is what she said: "Express yourself. Never be afraid to show who you really are. For if you hide your inner self, you are ignoring the true meaning of life. There is no perfect in this world. There is only you, the gifts you were born with. So cherish them to the end of time."
That's beautiful.
Now, if the children who are 15 and 18 are asked, you know, we all have gifts. You know, your sister has a gift of talking to an imaginary friend. What is your gift that you cherish? Tell me more, as Mary said. Tell me more. This works for me when I, am feeling overwhelmed or need a little extra attention for myself. What works for you? Use those prompting kinds of opening statements to invite quality exchange and conversation, heart to heart, with your children. That, to me, is the best remedy. What would you say, Mary?
Oh, I agree. Let me see. I just went blank. So,
because it really resonates your primary principle of all the work that you and Tobin do, which is how to cultivate the spiritual nature of children, is to tell more to the adults about what it is that we need to do so that they can better have the ability to meet
to work
the needs
with their children,
of the children, right?
Yes.
So
yep,
it's
that's exactly.
We're circling back to the opening of the show, which really is a beautiful bookend to say, now we have given you some ways to nurture the spiritual life of your children and tools and special skills that are required to develop and enhance your child's spiritual life. don't take anything for granted, and don't miss an opportunity like this where they're asking for integration, right? Psychological around the tasks at hand in life, as well as spiritual, which is the only purpose in spiritual life is to love and have that love expressed. And maybe not to simplify it so much so, but just to say that truly is the essence of spiritual life.
So beautifully said. Well,
thank you.
So I would like to just say a couple things that we have going on that very
Good,
much,
Mary, great idea.
Yes, that tie into this. We are in the process of writing and doing trainings around a curriculum that we call Opening Presence. And Opening Presence has the 4 basic concepts that if we are self-aware, that we love, that we are able to find our own guidance, and that we have expression of who we are, our soul purpose, and that we are able to be creative, that these are some of the foundations of being able to come to a spiritual core or to develop our spiritual core. So there are, Opening Presence is a number of exercises, very much like yours, with some meditations, some artwork, learning how to tap into your way of finding guidance, how to discern. So that's one of the programs that we've been working on.
How do people find you, Mary? What's the best way for people to get more information about this?
Well, the best way is probably through our website, and they're also welcome to call us. Our website is www.childspirit.org or .net, and our phone number is 678-839-0609, and so people are welcome to call us or email us. And
good.
And we're
That's
also
important. I know you have an upcoming conference or something also that...
We will have a conference. Our third North American Conference on Children's Spirituality will be coming up in 2007, just about a year from now. And if you wish to be on our mailing list, you can contact us, and we will let you know the details as they are being put in place. And so we would love to hear from people. And whether it has to do with questions that they might have about children, or if it's teachers about things that they might be able to do in their classrooms. We're also working with our local hospital behavioral health program that we've been working on a spiritual assessment that they use with children. So what are some of the spiritual strengths that children come in with, and how can we build on those as opposed to just looking at diagnoses and problems. So there's a number of different programs that we're working with.
Mary, that sounds like a very important new development, which I wanted to ask you to tell the listeners one or two places where they might get more information about that. I think you had a special website for that, didn't you?
Well, another program that we have that it's in the development stages is our spiritual matrix inventory, and this one will be coming out. I just actually checked it today, and our webmaster pulled it off the internet, but it should be back up in the next week, and that is www.spiritualassessment.org. And that's just a series of questions that will help people kind of map out some of their strengths and that that come naturally to them, and also might give you an idea of the children that you're working with and maybe some of the areas that their strengths are. So
perfect.
It's just another tool.
Mary, we want to thank you so much for joining us today, and I'd like to ask Cameron if on the way out we can hear the clip from A Grain of Sand, and just to remind the listeners that it is important for us to remember that there is only one of us in all of time. There's only one of each of us, and the more we honor our own wisdom and become aware of practicing the presence, that center place that can never be disturbed, the more wonder and wisdom and being fully expressed we're able to have in our lives. And so until next week, we say, have a good day, and thank you for joining us.
And thank you.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye now.